You probably don't need Topaz. This isn't saying she's bad. Honestly, I think for a certain type of individual, she may be really good. The problem is that for the vast majority of the player base, I don't think she's going to be a good summon as of right now, and therefore I have to judge her for what the current state of the game is right now. She's sandwiched between Jingliu, one of, if not the strongest characters in the game, tied for that position with Barba de Lunai, both of which have great eidolons. She's stuck next to a Seele, a great character. Seele doesn't really have the issue of Jing Yuan, wherein she fell off. She doesn't have the issue of Kafka, where she's more dependent on her team. I think Seele and Jingliu are both exceptional units, and Seele arguably has access to better teams because if you want to run a mono quantum team, you're getting some of the best units in the game. But Topaz is a character whose reliance on your team dealing follow-up attacks. She's a buffer to the equivalent extent of a Yukong or a Tingyun, and yes, she can deal good damage, like a Yukong, realistically, but she's much more meant to be buffing your Jing Yuan, to be buffing your Blade, maybe follow-up attacks, to be buffing your other teammates' abilities, and that can be perfectly fine, especially if you like follow-up attack characters, or especially if you invested pretty heavily into them, but, and this is a big but, if you don't, that unit is kind of a mid at best pull for your account. Because if you're investing heavily into her, and let's be honest here, if you've looked at or heard anything about the information regarding that character, her eidolons aren't necessarily geared towards improving her buffing utility and more so are geared towards improving her damage. And if you want more damage, just get a character who deals good damage. And I know that sounds like the equivalent to saying, yeah, just get better relics. But no, I mean just get a character who's focused on dealing damage and then summoning for supports or building up the supports for that unit. That could be your Fushuans or your Baranyas. That could just be building up a Tingyun or a Pela or a Yukong, these other units that you likely have access to. I don't think it is inherently worth it to pull for a limited 5-star unit for the sole purpose of buffing up your other 5-star units. Seele is still an exceptional unit. Seele may not necessarily be as AoE focused as somebody like Seele may not be as AoE focused as a character like Jingliu or Blade or even Barba de Lunai, but it doesn't necessarily mean she's bad. She still has a lot of great character traits and a lot of great utility. I mean, let's be honest here. Can you think of another character who gets and immediately can mess up the action order of your entire enemy lineup just by killing an opponent? Resurgence is exceptional. And as a result, it makes Seele an incredibly unique unit who otherwise can out-damage in a lot of scenarios, or at least outbeat other. Seele is an exceptional unit who can manipulate turn orders better than anybody else, save for Barba de Lunai at E2. Seele boosts her own speed, meaning that you don't necessarily have to focus as much on speed substats for your relics. Seele is a character who can, in a lot of scenarios, lower the amount of turns you're having to do per MOC rotation because she takes so many actions per turn. Even if I were to stop this one MOC run, and let's take a look at my Seele, she has the equivalent to 180-ish speed. And yeah, she's at E2, I understand that. But realistically, this is a character who's so easy to build because she's running attack boots right now, for reference. She's running attack boots. So this is a unit who may not have the crit scaling of Jingliu, but has the ability to inherently change the action order of your lineup and of your roster by simply using her scale. This is a unit who has innate resistance penetration in her kits and has access to some of the best teammates in the game with Silverwolf and Fushuan. And even though these technically can be used with Jingliu or Topaz, this is still something to keep in mind. I don't think either one of the units paired beside Topaz are bad, but I also think both of those units are units you can pick up and play. They're very plug-and-play units. You get a Jingliu, you just build her. That's it, and she does her job. You get a Seele, you just build her. That's it, and she does her job. You get a Topaz, you build her, and then you may want to slide in a Jing Yuan or a Serval or somebody else to help her do her job. I don't believe in the concept of investing for a character now and getting them now for the sole reason of using them later on. I don't think gacha should be treated as a buy now, use later system. I don't think Topaz is going to do or should be doing extremely well, because I don't want other characters to be an extent to where you pull like a Dan Heng and he's decent-ish, but you really need to pull another character like Blade to make him pop off. I don't think it would be a good idea if Blade relied on other characters taking his HP rather than himself. I feel like a character should be fully functional by themselves, and if they help everyone else out, nice. Jingliu kills her team to deal more damage. Doesn't necessarily mean she's tied to Blade. In fact, they're not even the best team together, but they work well enough. Jing Liu's kit wasn't reliant on Blade existing. Blade wasn't reliant on Jing Liu taking his HP. They just happened to work well together. And I think that's important to consider. I don't want I know Topaz is made to be a buffer. That's perfectly fine. But if you're considering who to pull, I do not believe Topaz is worth it in the current state. I believe that if you were looking at her later down the line, after she's released, after we have enough evidence to say if she's a worthwhile pull for your account, how much damage she's adding to your Jing Yuans, to your Himikos, to your other characters, and you see that and are like, hey, I want that, then cool, pull for that. But if not, you will have saved yourself more Primo Gems, more Orneric Shards, more Stellar Jades. And even if you're in a position to where you have these two characters, even if you have a Jing Liu, a Seele, their light cones are worth getting. Their Eidolons are worth getting. And so as a result of that, you're getting more value from investing more heavily into either one of these characters, up to E2 Seele, up to maybe E1 Jing Liu, than you will be from getting a Topaz who's, once again, dependent on other units. And that's just my standpoint. I understand you can have a different one. You can love your Jing Yuans, and if you want to get a buffer for Jing Yuan, go right ahead. But are you going to be sliding in a Jing Yuan with a Tingyun and maybe a Fushuan? Are you going to be sliding in a Jing Yuan with Topaz, then a Tingyun, and then a Fushuan, or then a Lynx? What's your plan there? And what's the skill point economy going to look like? Because he always has to use his skill. Are you going to make sure Topaz is consistently buffing him alongside Tingyun's skill point user once every 3 turns? And then Fushuan using her skill once every 2 turns? I don't know. I just don't see her being worth the pickup now. And I feel like her banner is probably going to do pretty poorly. But that's just me. Tell me your thoughts down below. I'll see you next time. I don't want this to come off as the whole video itself is me saying follow-up attack characters are bad and you can't summon for a character with the intention of using them in the future. I don't think that. I understand that a lot of individuals like Jing Yuan. I understand a lot of individuals like characters who utilize follow-up attacks. Even Clara technically does. However, what I do think is much more important is pulling a character that you know you can use decently well right now, like Fushuan for instance, but has and may have better uses in the future. Hypothetically speaking, if Bronny was a limited 5-star and you pulled her, you could have said at that point in there, she's good for any character in the game right now because she's exceptional as a buffer and she's not limited to one damage type. If Topaz was as a character, someone who could buff attack, similar to someone like Tingyun, and someone who could maybe change action orders or crit damage or whatever, it would be perfectly fine. But because she only buffs follow-up attacks, that is what, in my opinion, limits her down. Because you have a certain subset of characters who have to use her and who can use her, what we're going to see long-term is individuals, maybe like Jing Yuan, maybe individuals like Himiko and so on, who use follow-up attacks but are scaled with the concept in mind that they can be buffed by Topaz. And I don't want that to inherently make follow-up attack characters worse. I don't think they will, but that's just something that pops into my head at thought. And so when I come and I look at someone like Topaz, I don't see a lot of potential value for her as of right now because we have so many good alternatives. Seele, you can make a DPS Silverwolf, you can use Jing Liu, Blade, and Baba Lunai, even Himiko, Clara, and so on, all perform decently well without requiring her. So if it was a question of, oh, you pull Kafka and hypothetically she does good damage on her own, but if you pair her with damage over time characters, she's even better. That's a situation where I can see, yeah, you use damage over time already, might as well get her. But if you're utilizing one character whose sole purpose is essentially buffing one type of damage, I think that's a bit more difficult to justify. Because to a degree, a bunch of characters can apply damage over time. You can apply burning with Hook, you can apply burning with Asta, you can have physical breaks, you can have multiple different ways of applying a DOT, not just one. And in terms of Topaz, because of who she's sandwiched between a high value DPS and a high value DPS, and then HoYo, another support that's also looking really nice, it's a bit more difficult for me to adequately say, this is a character you need. This is a character you should pull, especially over the other options, especially over options like Argenti and HoYo and Silverwolf as a rerun. That's just my thoughts. I understand yours can differ. I understand you can love your Jing Yuans and your Claras and your Himikos, but I just think she doesn't hold as much value right now. Maybe later she will. Either way, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.